On the day this episode is published, we have 2 years, 8 months and 80 days left to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Hello and welcome to the 4th episode of the GreenTech Startups podcast. My name is Thomas Riedel and I'm glad you tuned in again. In today's interview, I'm talking to co-founder and CEO of Planblue, Joost and Haan. The Bremen-based startup with a Dutch CEO and international team is engaged in mapping the seafloor. Thanks to a specially developed sensor technology, they can do this with unprecedented precision. And this precision is needed if one wants to make accurate calculations about the state of the sea and the seabed. And just how important the seabed is shown by this surprising fact. Seagrass is 35 times better at storing carbon than the rainforest. Look forward to an exciting interview with Joost and Haan below the ocean's surface as they build a global seafloor database with underwater satellites. But before we get right to the interview, I have 5 exciting GreenTech news items for you. The EU Commission has presented a law against greenwashing that is to apply to all product groups. This is about voluntary claims of a product which, according to a study, are said to be misleading to 50%. The law is intended to give tricksters no more chance and to reward companies that really do something sustainable. Environmental protection movements criticize the draft as completely watered down. In particular, they criticize the lack of regulation of the term carbon neutral. Personally, I think it's good that the law exists for now. I see the fact that lobbyists were once again able to exert so much influence on the quality of the law as a serious problem. Let's hope that future modifications of the law will actually help to fight greenwashing. I have 2 more news about vertical farming today for you. The Munich-based vertical farming company Agrilution is giving up due to lack of economic perspective, as Deutsche Startups.de reports. The company already slid into insolvency in 2019, but was then rescued by Tengelmann Ventures. Now, however, the complete end is in sight. And there's also bad news from the Berlin vertical farming unicorn Infarm. They presented the annual report of 2021. According to this, a loss of 127.8 million euros was made on sales of only 8.1 million euros. The figures from the previous year don't look flowering either. In the previous year, sales of 3.8 million euros and a loss of 74.5 million euros were made. High personal costs were to blame here. That's why the company recently cut its workforce by 500. I have 2 more GreenTech investment news for you. Biopolymer startup AM Silk is taking home 54 million euros in a Series C investment. The Bavarian company aims to scale up and expand commercial operations of its biofabricated silk protein materials, as TechEU reports. And TechCrunch reports exclusively on an investment in Darmstadt-based startup Magnoterm. The original plan was for an investment of 5 million, but that was ultimately exceeded with 6.9 million. The startup is developing a magnetic cooling unit that is supposed to be free of pollutants and is not in danger of exploding. Sounds good to me. By the way, you can find all links to the news in the show notes, and if you feel like sharing, feel free to come to our Discord server, where you can find the community for all my podcast projects. All right, so we've already spoken about new space in this podcast. Time to speak about the new maritime startups. I'm very happy to welcome the co-founder and CEO of Planblue, Joost and Haan. We're talking so much about forests as carbon sinks, but there's a carbon sink which is 35 times better storing carbon, which is the seagrass in the ocean. And this is why it is my pleasure to learn a lot about the seafloor and how to make money with protecting the seafloor. Welcome, Joost.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you on the show. So, one of the great news in the last couple of days was probably the High Seas Treaty of the United Nations. You probably heard about that.
Yep.
What does it mean for you? Is it important for you, or does it matter? Doesn't it matter at all?
No, it's actually very important. That's also when I saw that announced, in this case on the BBC, I immediately forwarded to the rest of my company because I think it's very important that everybody's aware of this important next step to help protect 30% of our oceans by 2030. No, I think it's a really important step because we're all in this together in climate change, and we need to work on all kinds of levels together. And this is a very important next step.
And I guess we're talking a lot about forests and about protecting the environment above the sea level. But we are not so much talking about what is below the sea level or about the seas itself. You don't hear much about that, at least in my news feed. So hearing something moving in that direction was actually surprising for me, and it's probably a rare occasion, right?
Yeah, the seafloor. So what we focus on with Planblue is generally a place that's very, out of sight, out of mind. Because we as people, we don't live underwater, so it's very difficult to automatically understand why the seafloor is so important for all of us, and it's hugely important for climate regulation. And yeah, like you mentioned earlier, it's really true. The seafloor is a very important way to quickly capture as much CO2 out of the atmosphere as possible. It's a very important nature-based solution, so to say. And seagrass meadows have so much potential. But there's more, of course, than seagrass meadows. There's kelp forests as well, and there's other types of seaweeds and organisms that help capture CO2 or carbon from the water that's beforehand dissolved into the ocean. The CO2 has been pumping in the atmosphere for so long already, and for us, it's really important to help visualize the potential of the seafloor, both ecologically and economically. And that's one of the main drivers why we started Planblue.
Absolutely. So I find it quite obvious that everything happens in space. We have so many science fiction series about space, and since Sequest DSV was discontinued, we have really no series about the ocean. This is also probably something we have to talk about in the future. We need more science fiction series in the ocean again, to be honest. It would be so great to see Sequest floating again in the ocean. So when before we start talking about the startup itself, maybe you talk a little bit more about yourself. Introduce yourself a little bit. Where did your journey rescuing the oceans actually started?
Yeah, so I grew up in Holland, below sea level, pretty much. So I always had automatically a big respect towards our oceans. And, living close to the ocean, I was drawn towards it. And I've been an active diver for the last 18 plus years, approximately. And I've literally seen the seafloor degrade in front of my eyes. But the oceans were always really, really important to me. Being underwater, being on top of the water, I also enjoy. And I initially took a scientific career, or had a scientific career where I, looked at the effect of climate change and pollution on the seafloor. And I was also a dive instructor for a while, where I was training my students a little bit more about the oceans and the environment and so forth. And for me, it was always really important to visualize and explain how important it is and the seafloor. And I found it very difficult in science to do that. I had my master's, my PhD, and my postdoc on it, but it was, really visualizations were very difficult. And I had the feeling I was doing a lot of science just to do more science. And I really wanted to go into the practical terms of things. And, that's one of the main reasons also why we started Planblue back in the day, to literally put the seafloor on the map again, because there's so much possible there. So it's partly because of my, personal drive to help protect our oceans by making them visible, and in particular the seafloor. But at the same time, we saw a big business opportunity there. And that's why we started Planblue.
So you didn't start it all by yourself. Who also joined you with that startup?
Yeah, I have three co-founders. Hannah is one of my co-founders, and she also had an environmental background, so to say. Also did a scientific career. She's a chief strategy officer, also a very, very good diver. She's a very big passion for the ocean herself as well. We have Guy, who is our CTO. He actually comes from the geospatial industry, or for the aerospace industry, I must say, actually. And he also became a good diver. So he also has a lot of respect for the oceans. And then we have Raja, who is originally from India. He is our innovation specialist. He's really good in developing hardware, software. And with the three of us, because we had, a very different type of people, we have very different types of backgrounds. It was a really good starting point because we also realized this is a very big topic to help tackle. We need a lot of expertise, but I'm super happy to have those, the three of them with me starting Planblue, and now we're about 25 people. So that makes me really proud. The road that we've been going so far.
Yeah, we will talk about that road, of course, in a minute. So I have a question before we dig deeper into Planblue. In what kind of industry are you actually in? Is it maritime startups? Is it because there's something like new space, which is very easy. You could say there's e-commerce and other stuff, what is the actually right expression to describe your endeavor?
Yeah, so we're focusing on the geospatial industry. So the geospatial industry really combines the governmental entities, can be private companies, NGOs, research, and they all focus on developing geospatial technology, manufacturing it, researching it, and has a lot to do with data collection, data storing, integrating it, mapping, and it's all really tied to a specific location on Earth. And there's a lot of companies, like really big companies, that are involved in this business. But it's really about, a lot of it is about really mapping and understanding what am I actually looking at and what can I do with it.
So when you thought about starting that company, did you find something else out in your studies to bring into the company? Was it something you said, okay, this is something we can do? Or was that something which you developed while founding the company?
Well, when we founded the company, we were looking at a lot of different use cases where we could fit our technology. So we looked into, plastic waste monitoring. We looked into biodiversity. We looked at underwater construction. So there was a lot of, different types of use cases we could go into. But then we realized that the blue carbon space, so basically the carbon captured by the oceans and coastal ecosystems, that space is really true to our heart, because it's really the place where we believe we can really make an impact, because there's a type of data lacking to really help unlock the power of blue carbon. But at the same time, we also saw the big business opportunity there because of that lack of that type of data, and how we can help improve it and really unlock the power of the blue carbon industry. That's why we combined the two. So it's very much linked to both an ethical drive that we have, an impact drive that we have, and the business opportunity.
Yeah. So mapping is actually the foundation of everything you do in the ocean, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we collect data that you can then, represent as how you want. And I also once gave a TED talk about, visualizing the underwater world, because it's so much out of sight, out of mind, it's automatically very difficult to interpret how important the seafloor is on multiple levels. And easy visualizations are really key. So if you, for example, look at the seafloor and you can color code it green, that's healthy, or red, it's not healthy, that already says a lot. And you don't have to be very experienced to understand that. So it needs to be graspable, it needs to be easy to understand. And you can then make it as complicated as you want afterwards. But it's really that showing the true value in an easy way that's super important.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about why the ocean is so important. I mentioned it a little bit in my introduction, but maybe you have some more figures for us to make understand what we are actually talking about. And maybe also explain really quick, what is blue carbon actually meaning?
Yeah, so blue carbon is really the carbon captured by the world's oceans and coastal ecosystems. So I know a lot of the CO2 that's in the atmosphere, we've been pumping in the atmosphere already for too long, gets dissolved into the ocean, gets captured then by organisms like seagrasses and kelp. It's absorbed by, for example, phytoplankton, which is then eaten by zooplankton, which is then eaten by other organisms, and sort of falls to the deep sea as a way of locking away carbon. In terms of climate regulations, the oceans play a really big role. And blue carbon is a term that captures that phenomena.
And how big is actually the role?
Without oceans, we're not there. So as people, so there's no. It's super important because not just I think about a third or 25% of the CO2 we pump in the atmosphere is actually automatically, or is captured by the oceans. About half of the oxygen that we're breathing, so every second breath that you take, is coming from the ocean. It's a huge food source for billions of people, provides millions of jobs to people around the world. Like I said, it regulates our climate, temperature. So it's really, really key. But a very important part of the ocean is not just the water that you swim in or that you go around with your boat. It's also the seafloor, and that always really fascinates me because it's such a different world, but such an important world to experience. That's also one thing that we do in our company is that people that join us, they have the opportunity to learn to dive, to see what is actually down there, because it is really different. It's not like you're in a 3D space. You can go up, you can go down, you can go left, you can right. You're not sort of stuck to gravity. You can make yourself fly on the water. So it's an amazing experience. But it's a very different world. It's not a world where we live as people. So we need to respect that. We need to understand it. We need to be able to manage it well. It needs to be managed sustainably. And for that, having data available is to make the right decisions is really key.
Yeah, it's probably like virtual reality. You don't know what it is until you have done it. It's probably with diving the same. When you have seen the floor, the seafloor for the first time, you actually understand what this means. So let's talk a little bit about the business, because this is a startup podcast. And of course, we are here not only to rescue the future of human mankind, but also to make money and stay happy. So what is your startup actually doing, and how do you earn money with it?
Yeah, so we developed a novel seafloor monitoring technology that allows you to really look at the highest detail of the seafloor. It's a technology that combines advanced imaging, underwater navigation, and artificial intelligence. And our aim is to, significantly improve time to data. This is a really big thing, and because anything that you do underwater is expensive. It's just expensive to go in the water. There's all kinds of requirements that need to be met. Technologies needs to be, watertight, and there's a lot involved, a lot of logistics, and you need to really be very, very targeted. And that's so our technology allows you to, in a very objective and standardized way, look at the seafloor. It's a technology that can be deployed by divers. It can also be mounted, or we're actually mounting it on robots now as well, to really bring a different and important layer of information that you can then link to larger data sets, like aerial and satellite imagery, to really scale. Ultimately, we have our business model is to sell data, but the type of data we collect is very high detail. There's no way we're going to map with our technology the whole ocean floor. It's not realistic. But the power is really in combining different data sets with one another. So that's why ultimately what we do at Planblue is we ground truth aerial and satellite imagery to bring scale to large scale mapping. And that is really, really important, because you're not just interested in a 100 by 100 square meter seafloor area. You're interested in hectares and kilometers and thousands of kilometers to really see what is happening, the impact that you can make.
So you actually have hardware which you deploy on the seafloor to gather data. That's one part of your data collection process, right?
Yeah, so we have a hardware component and a software component. So the hardware is really where we collect data. I was also in Japan recently to collect data for a campaign. And
so you dived yourself and collected data.
Yeah, I did. In this case, I'm not always going, but sometimes I do tend to join campaigns. I joined on a campaign to collect Seafloor data with our technology. We sometimes call it an underwater satellite because of how we collect data, how we process data, and how we store data is very similar to how satellites operate in space. So this hardware component, sort of a type of camera that we're using, but a camera that also knows where it is underwater. And that's really important because underwater there's no GPS, and anything that you do in terms of monitoring, you need to see how things change over time. So you need to know how it changed, how it is now, what is your baseline, and how it changed over time. You need to be able to go back to the same point. And if there's no GPS, or when there's no GPS underwater, it's really difficult to do that. So that's one of the tools that we implemented in our monitoring solution is underwater navigation sensors.
Which you do with pressure probably and water movement and stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, there's like a compass involved. It's about speed and rotation. It's really complicated. I could never reproduce it by myself because I'm not originally an engineer, but I know what it should do in the end. So that's because we have a really awesome team that's developing the technology, both hardware and software, and there's of course a lot more to it than that. But yeah, so we have a tool to collect that data in a very efficient and timely manner. Like I said, with divers initially, that's how we started, and we still do that. But now also we're moving to robots to bring scale to data collection. And yeah, the second part is really about data science and software, is taking out the information that is of use to our end user, to our customers from the geospatial world. Because the type of data we collect is so rich, you can go into all kinds of use cases if you want.
So maybe elaborate a little bit more about your customers, because I have no idea why somebody would actually buy your product at this point. What companies are interested in your data?
Companies that are interested in our type of solutions are really from the geospatial world. There's quite a lot of companies out there, but it can also be research institutes, it can be NGOs we've been working with before, but also governmental entities. So it's actually a really diverse group that is interested in our technology. For example, next week I'm actually going to the Monaco Ocean Week, and Monaco was one of our first customers that we worked with. It was because they were interested in learning more about underwater constructions that they created. For example, we also did, for example, a campaign with the Ocean Cleanup, who's collecting all the plastic floating in the ocean.
The Ocean Cleanup.
Yeah, the Ocean Cleanup. Mm-hmm. Yeah, been quite a diverse group that we've been working with. But like I said, now we're really focusing on the whole blue carbon space. That's really the industry that we're working on.
And give us an impression about how much money we're talking about here. How big is that market? What kind of share do you want to have? Give us some insights about that, please.
Yeah, sure. So the blue carbon space is a very much a developing market, and I often like to relate it first to carbon crediting space. So carbon credits that that people are handing out for forests, it's projected to grow to about 50 billion by 2030. And a small part of this is still blue carbon. And it is very small because of handing out blue carbon credits is quite tricky. And one of the things that is tricky is in terms of type of data that is out there to really bring openness and transparency to this credit. There's some good developments happening in this field. But we also feel that it's important to give more detailed information to help, validate blue carbon credits. So it's very much an emerging market. So to actually give figures to just blue carbon is quite tricky. But to give you the overall trend towards, carbon credits and how it's growing to about 50 or projected to grow to 50 billion by 2030, there's a lot of opportunity there. And because the Seafloor is so important in capturing carbon, and it's so efficient in doing that in terms of seagrass and kelp and so forth, there we see a lot of opportunity there. So that's I hope that sheds some light on the potential.
Yeah, I mean, since you're doing some basic work in mapping, I guess what the partners do with all this data is so huge that it's actually probably pretty hard to actually give a concrete number. It's like you're doing some kind of Google Maps, and well, people using it for everything, so that's probably a thing which is hard to decipher or to give a number to. What I'm also pretty much interested is how you actually develop the product, because it seems very complex. There are some very hard things to do in the technical way. You don't have easy customers. Yeah, they want good data. They are probably the life cycles is pretty long. And so how do you actually do the product development? What do you need for it? And how long do you need to actually get a new feature?
Yeah, so it's because we can tackle all kinds of different use cases at the same time. That's a good thing, but also a tricky thing at the same time, because you want to be really targeted, and that's also what we're really focusing within the company on right now. Because with an emerging market, the customer often doesn't have a good idea what they really want. So really having a very good project scope meeting is important. Like, what is actually the question you want to have answered? And so we also have we're developing methodology to monitor or estimate carbon stock underwater. So how much carbon is there actually now in seagrass meadows, and how does that change over time? And for that answer to be given, you can already develop multiple data products. So things we can actually sell. So in terms of, what is the percentage of seagrass? Does it expand over time or not? What is the density of it? Is it healthy or not? Because that is a very important thing that we're developing now, because health says something about whether something is a carbon sequester, so taking up CO2, or not. And because just looking at how much seagrass is there, it can only tell you so much. If half of it is dying, that has a really impact on the carbon stock and sequestration potential of it. And these are different data sets. So for us, it's really about, what does the customer really need? Make sure that the data products that they want are usable also by multiple customers. And that's exactly the state that we are in right now. So yeah, it's an exciting year for us with all the different data products hopefully coming out soon.
So also maybe you give an update about where you are in the development of your startup. Like when did you start actually, in which year? And do you already have products on the market? What are your next goals?
Yeah, so we started back in 2017, and we put a lot of effort into further developing the technology. That was really important for us, and then really looking at what kind of use cases are out there, like I mentioned earlier, with plastic and with biodiversity and so forth. Yeah, as you go along the way and you do more campaigns, you talk to more customers, and you see markets developing. We really try to be agile in saying, like, what is the best opportunity for us. And working underwater is challenging. It's also not a place where a lot of investments go, which is a bummer, because the oceans is really, really important, of course. And yeah, so it took us quite a few years to really get to the point where we are now, that we've done proof of concept in multiple locations around the world, and really see what the potential is that we have now within the whole blue carbon space.
Developing an e-commerce startup is rather easy, I'd say, but you still need some special things you can do to develop a e-commerce startup. Certain kind of knowledge. You need some special technicians to do that, and you actually need some kind of product or something like that. What is special about the startup you do? And maybe you have some tips and tricks when somebody says, okay, I will also want to get active in underwater business.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have some tips and tricks for everybody who wants to get into that space.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing that I learned when I started Planblue with my co-founders is that how much I don't know, and how much expertise we need to bring into Planblue to really make it a success. So we're very fortunate to join an awesome accelerator program just when we started Planblue, which is called Climate Kick. It's funded by EIT, so by the EU. And that gave us a lot of insight into, what do we need? And we realized that working in the underwater space, you need a lot of capital. So you really need to find investors, you need to find public funding. That's been one of the things also I've been really focused on together with my co-founder Haan, is on getting all this funding on board to really make things happen. Because it's, like I said, anything underwater doing is expensive. It's the technology that we develop needs a lot of capital to get it to a good, stable state. And we're very close to reaching that point now. I would still say we're in the prototype phase, but we're very close to, getting an actual product. And I'm very, very happy with that. That we're now at that point also that we, getting clarity in what direction the company needs to go, and the opportunity that the blue carbon space provides by filling a so-called, space data gap of information to help ground truth, aerial and satellite imagery.
So it's very important to learn a lot because there's much to be learned in that space. It's very important to build up the network, maybe even more so as the space is not as big as any others. If I remember or imagine the Cologne startup scene, for example, where I live, there's no maritime startups or geospatial startups around I can remember, and there's actually no accelerator or something like that talking about that. So that's probably very important to look who's there and connect. And I would assume that the scene, that the network is very cooperative, so that there's probably not that much of elbows in the game. I'd assume. Is that right?
Yeah. For the moment, the type of monitoring that we do is still relatively new. I mean, there's other companies that also do, or initiatives that have underwater hyperspectral imaging. That's one of the core technologies that we use, but it's still quite underdeveloped. So it's the situation that we're in is still quite new. But of course, it's going to be inevitable that this is going to be used more because there's so much more you can do with hyperspectral imaging versus normal imaging. And that gives you a lot of opportunities. But the one thing I wanted to mention is that so we really also looked for other types of accelerator programs that are actually from the ocean space. And we found those. There's one in San Francisco called the Sustainable Ocean Alliance. And that's really where startups from the ocean space from around the world meet. And that is super valuable, both from a hardware and software development perspective, better understanding your customers, better understanding how you can scale. And we also have close ties to, the space industry. We're also in this incubator program from the European Space Agency here in Bremen. So it's really about trying to network, connect to the right people that give you insights, can help you accelerate. And it all comes down to understanding that there's a lot of things you don't know and that you need support. And we need the support on all kinds of levels. So we have a really great community besides our awesome employees backing us. And that's really key to, especially develop a startup working in the ocean space, because it is still quite unique. Yeah.
And it's probably deep tech in the sense of the word, actually. I find that very funny, to be honest. It's really deep tech.
It is deep tech, yeah. Yeah.
It's really deep tech. And so to close up the podcast episode, what is your biggest pain right now? What you're working on, and maybe tell us something where our listeners can maybe help you with.
That's a very good question. It's a space that we're working on that is relatively new and developing the whole blue carbon space. So there's of course a lot of questions, and being sort of a forerunner in your field, you have to take a lot of additional hurdles which other companies in other fields would have already done before you, or other initiatives. So that can be really challenging. But so what we really try to do is to, link up with people from the geospatial world, to really learn from them and what kind of synergies are there, and do more proof of concept campaigns to really, show what the potential that we have, what we actually do, what do we actually provide to our customers and so forth. And that's I think that's really key.
And the listeners can help how? Do you need more employees? What should they bring? Is that something you're looking for?
Yeah, we're always, open to. We have an open application policy. So if people are interested to join Planblue, excited about the underwater world, that is of course, we'd be very, very curious about that. We're very keen to learn, and so we are, deep tech company, so we need a lot of expertise from software and hardware development. So there will be some more posts going out probably. And also, if everything goes well at Planblue, we really want to be a very big company. And it is very, data science, software focused it will be, even though we always have a hardware component to it. It will be a tech heavy company, but it doesn't mean we only we also need commercial mindset. We need sales. We need business development.
And product guys, yeah.
Product guys, yeah, exactly. So it's we have big plans.
And it's probably a great opportunity to come closer to something like Sequest DSV by joining Planblue, because this is a space which is still underdeveloped, but so important for human mankind.
Yep.
And it's a great market which develops. So very, very interesting field to work on. So that's, for me, the end of the podcast. Thank you very much, Joost, co-founder and CEO of Planblue. I wish you all the best. And yeah, let's see where everything develops.
Thanks a lot. It was great to be here.
And that was episode 7 of the GreenTech Startups podcast. Many thanks again to Joost and Haan from Planblue. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate 5-star ratings on iTunes and Spotify. All links to the interview partner and the news can be found in the show notes or on greentech-startups.com. My name is Thomas Riedel. Thank you for listening.
Dieser Podcast ist eine Droidboy-Produktion.